All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday, May 14th, 2025 meeting of the City of Revere Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board. My name is Joe Gravelisi. I serve as chair of the board on behalf of Mayor Patrick Keefe. So we'll begin with a roll call of the members. So I am present, Anayo Saki.
Present.
Matt Wolfer let me know that he is on a train back from New York on a business trip, was hoping to make it in person, but if not, he was going to dial in, but I don't see him yet, so he's not here yet. Deb Frank also let me know that she's not going to be able to make it today. Lori Manzo,
Present.
Layla Pietri,
Present.
Dean Harris.
Present.
Terrific. And then, as we know, sadly, Claire served her final meeting last month with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board, so she's rolled off. And I didn't have the chance to state this because I missed the last meeting. But thank you to Claire for everything you do, everything you've done for the board, continue to do. It's been invaluable and greatly appreciated. We're going to start, as we always do, with a check-in on the finances for the board. So we'll turn that over to the treasurer and IO.
Sure. Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. The current balance of the Affordable Housing Trust Committee, as provided to me by Susan Newton, who is the Assistant Budget Director, is $905,420. Sorry, $905,420.25. That's 905,420.25. This is due to an annual appropriation from free cash of $222,634. That's 224,634, or 222,634.
Great, thank you very much. I had kind of membership matters as my next agenda item, and we're going to roll those. We have a potential new member going through the process of being confirmed, so she'll be appearing before the appointment subcommittee. So that's not happening for this meeting, but hopefully for the next one. So we look forward to that. And then he's not present at the moment, so I may postpone this as well. But I was going to nominate Matt to take Claire's role as vice chair, based on some conversations that we had about some of his financial, background and ability to really help us with that aspect of it. But if anyone else is interested in serving in that capacity, I'd be happy to have that conversation with you as well. But I'm gonna move that we postpone that discussion until next month. And if we want to discuss it in the interim, if anyone has any suggestions or thoughts on the matter, let me know. But any objection to postponing membership matters until next month?
No.
Speaking of Matt, I see that he is in our Zoom reading room, so I think we've got him. Matt, sorry to hear that your train got delayed back to Boston. Yeah, I think. Oh, that's right. We've got him 1, 2 here. All right. Matt, we've got you. Can you hear us?
Yep. Hey, sorry for being late.
No worries. Sorry about your train delays. So what you've missed so far was just the updated balance from an IO. And then also our membership matters, our swearing in of a new member and discussing the vice chair nomination we're going to push to next month, if that's okay with you, just so that we can all be here in person for that. Any objections to either of those matters? Nope. Okay, so moving on, a couple things that we want to make sure that we touch on, and then I don't want to leave our guests waiting too long, but these should be pretty quick. I want to pick up our subcommittees on home ownership and fundraising and schedule meetings of those subcommittees for ideally next week, although I do know we're kind of coming up on a holiday. If I reached out to everybody on each subcommittee about finding time for a call like next week, are there days that immediately stand out for anyone that you definitely can't do? Okay, so I'll send around a few different options, but we'd love to kind of get those on the agenda for next week. In particular, on the home ownership side, there's 2 things, and this will fit into our budget framework conversation, which Matt will be joining us remotely for, and I'll talk through a little bit. The 2 big projects that we really want to sink our teeth into are subsidized home ownership opportunities, right? Home ownership opportunities for Revere residents, and then also any work that we might do on ADU ADU support, like a loan program or a grant program for ADUs, with a restriction that they be rented out at below market rate, right, at the affordable price. So I definitely want us to kind of start really putting the wheels in motion for that a little bit. And to help get us into that mindset of what we're able to do and what's realistic, I want to talk a little bit through a multi-year budget framework that Matt was nice enough to put together for us. And I'm going to just share a screen and share it with everybody and send around to everyone. So hold on one second. Let me make sure that my testing before the meeting still works. Hold on. Okay. So that might be a little bit blurry for the TV viewers, so we apologize for that. But for those that have it at your screen, you can see with the support of an IO as the treasurer, we put together what we know in terms of what we have in the account, what we receive for inflows, and what our projected possible outflows are. Both things that we've theoretically done, things that we could do, and what we anticipate gaining in interest, right? So we look at where the fund sits now at $907,553. Is that somewhere in that range, between interest accrued and what we received as an allocation for the year. And then if we look out kind of moving forward, we already know that we've agreed to expend a certain amount on down payment assistance grants for first-time home buyers. So that's calculated into the assumptions. And then things that we put as possibilities that I want to bring to everyone's attention to discuss is the possibility of providing support for the 110 Ocean project via the neighborhood developers, which we're going to talk about next, as well as a senior home repairs program, which if we were to operate that, it would be funded separately. So we'd get additional funding from the city for that if it gets approved. But if we assume that we do those things, or even if we don't, this helps us kind of get a sense of what we have left. And what I would kind of propose that we think about for as a framework is we'd want to maintain some sort of minimum buffer. Like we don't want to spend the entirety of the balance in a given year, but we want to begin putting what we have towards really our major goals. And when I think about what our major goals are, we went through this goal setting process. We talked about how we wanted to prioritize the many, many, many things that we want to do in the world of affordable housing with the knowledge that, you know, we have a limited budget. And I think loud and clear, right, it was emphasized that our primary goal is promoting affordable homeownership opportunities. That kind of came across as number one. I think when you look at what we have available for future years, I would say that that's where we'd want to put the bulk, right, of what we have left over for the budget. And then we'd want to figure out what's a reasonable amount to put towards ADUs. I think could be kind of that second big bucket. And then the third should be something that really focuses on our lowest income, or, you know, people in that 0% to 20% AMI range, extremely low income, you know, people that are at risk of homelessness or that may be coming out of homelessness, where, you know, that might not be the biggest piece of our budget, but I think it should be part of it, right? We all kind of agreed that we want to try to help across the spectrum as the best as we can, with kind of those being our focus areas. So I wanted to lay this out just to help us kind of understand what the picture looked like. You know, I think this is a little confusing, but I think if you kind of look at it as we know, we can anticipate that each year we're going to receive a roughly, you know, $200,000 allocation from the city for free cash. We certainly hope that we can find new revenue sources in the future. So through like potentially the Community Preservation Act, or through, you know, if there's any inclusionary zoning or anything like that that would allow us to get a consistent flow of revenue, or through private fundraising, which I know is something that we've explored and talked about, or through partnership with something like a community land trust, which is something that we're going to talk about as well. But hopefully these numbers can help just sort of set a frame when we think about, when I start throwing numbers at you for projects, help you kind of understand a little bit of where we sit. I'm going to send this to everybody so that you can take a look at it. But before I take it down off the screen, does anyone have any questions about like what you're looking at? Okay. And again, like I said, to be clear, we haven't voted on like the neighborhood developers proposal. We haven't voted on the senior home repairs project yet. These are in theory, but I just want to make sure we're kind of thinking about them in theory. And now, when you think about what we have sort of free to commit for projects for this year, this is up to us, right? This is a collective decision. This isn't my decision. This isn't your decision. But I'd like to kind of propose that we think about a buffer of around $350,000 that we'd want to keep in case we get emergency requests, you know, or to have something that we want to build on and is building interest in the future. I wouldn't want to spend the whole account down this year, right? But, and then if we keep a certain buffer, that leaves us about $557,000 free to commit towards other projects, assuming we also do the other ones that are listed. And what we need to kind of decide upon is how we want to break that down in terms of ADUs, homeownership opportunities, other ideas that people have had, et cetera. Does that make sense? Is that kind of, I hope I'm not kind of speaking, you know, confusingly. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. Yeah. Right, yeah. I don't think that they heard you on, yeah.
So I think the $300,000 or $350,000, having a reserve makes sense, especially at these interest rates. You'll be generating some sort of interest at maybe $1,000, $1,200 a month by the numbers that you had up there over a year period. And then you can put that money back out there if you have like an ADU program. Let's say you were going to offer $5,000 to $10,000 per household to create an ADU in their home, which would benefit someone that's low income. It just makes sense to be able to do it.
Great. And so I know that the initial conversations we had about home ownership and ADU programs were kind of more hypothetical, and we have to get them into the actual. And part of that I want to do in the subcommittee, but I do want to actually bring up, because it's timely. It's something that's come up in conversation with Tom, who can't be here tonight, but passes along his greetings. You know, one option that we have, I know we talked about the idea of putting out sort of a call to people that are potentially purchasing properties in Revere and offering to subsidize one of the units, right? Like if it's a 2-family or a 3-family or 4-family, in exchange for restricting it as an affordable homeownership opportunity. That's still something I want to explore. And Matt has been kind of doing some market analysis, looking into the delta between affordable price and market rate price to help us see what would be a reasonable amount to offer to try to entice that. But we do potentially have another opportunity sooner than that that I wanted to explore with everybody and get people's thoughts on. Without going too much into the details yet, there are a number of properties in the city that have deed restrictions on them that actually were originally created by the Malden Redevelopment Authority. And for reasons that I'm still trying to ascertain, at some point they were transferred to the city of Revere, early in the 21st century. And there are a number of people that own these deed restricted properties that may at some point be coming up on being interested in selling them. And the deeds specifically spells out that the city actually has right of first refusal and the opportunity to purchase these properties first, you know, before they go to market. And, you know, the conversation that I'd want to have with everybody is, if one of these became available, you know, it would present an opportunity for us to purchase it at the deed restricted affordable price, which, depending on the property, you know, could be somewhere between $290,000 to $350,000 ish from the ones that I've seen. And then we'd be able to potentially, you know, sell it to a Revere resident that is 80% or below AMI for their household as an affordable home ownership opportunity. And in theory, it wouldn't cost us much of anything because it would be sold, for the same price that we bought it for, roughly. There would be some costs associated for us in terms of like ensuring that everything is code compliant and any, realtor fees or other things that are associated with that. So I would imagine the cost wouldn't be zero, but it would be close, right? I think that I wanted to get people's thoughts. Like the downside of doing it this way is that technically this is already a property that's in the subsidized housing inventory. So we wouldn't really be adding to the subsidized housing inventory. But we'd be ensuring, that we could have a fair, transparent process with the Revere resident preference, which wouldn't necessarily be the case if it was sort of on the open market. And we might be able to just kind of have a little bit more control over the process. And we'd be able to take over kind of more properly monitoring these deed restricted properties via the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Whereas right now, it's kind of in this nebulous area where the city is the monitor, but that was never really, recorded in any particular place. I know I threw a lot of information at you. I'd love to just kind of open it up. I don't want to get into specifics of specific properties because these are individuals and it's their right as to whether they'd want to sell them or not. But I wanted to get people's thoughts on exploring that possibility if one of the holders of these properties did elect to sell them.
Okay, and this week, the Massachusetts Senate is looking for the amendment for the budget. So we have to be aware what is the final disposition for these cases. They have different amendments may be affected to us. They have amendments for the first-time home buyers, foreclosure prevention. They have housing first responders restoration. They have Massachusetts Healthy Homes Program. And all this week will be the final disposition. So will be, after that, maybe we could answer from the Senate for all the cities, and especially for us. So let's see after that what I will get it from the amendments this week for different programs that we are gonna do it for the affordable house.
Thank you. It's a good point. And obviously, we all anticipate learning more about that once that process completes. So thank you. Others have thoughts on sort of this as a concept for homeownership promotion?
I have a quick question in regards to how you're able to identify properties that have deed restriction. So from what I understand, there's this registry, the Middlesex South Registry Deeds. Is that accessible site? And also, how automated is this? I know you cannot, I guess the laborious process of finding what's available in the market in terms of being what's available to sell, and then you would probably cross-check that with the registry.
Yeah.
Is there a flag of sorts?
So I think you bring up a really good point, and I think there's two separate things that we'd want to think about doing. So one is the monitoring side, and I think that Claire has actually done some work on this, and so I probably want to, drag her right back in front of us as a guest to, in terms of tracking kind of what's on the subsidized housing inventory and monitoring the things that are, kind of putting some of that monitoring responsibility under the purview of the Affordable Housing Trust is a really good idea. And we want to do that, and we can do that. But what I speak of, with this kind of concept is actually when the owner is electing to sell. So we wouldn't necessarily be like soliciting them to do that. But when they do choose to sell, they are legally required to notify the city because the city has the right to exercise its right of first refusal on the property. And I want to be prepared for, I have reason to believe, based on conversations I've had, that a few of these might happen soon for a couple of these properties. And if it did, I'd want to just, know if that's something that we'd be interested in, if we think it would be, a fit within our goals and things that we wanted to do. Obviously, before we did anything, we'd have to meet as a group and talk about the particulars of that property and whether we thought it made sense and different aspects of it. But, I wanted to make sure I'm explaining the concept clearly too, like if people kind of get what I'm talking about, what that means, anyone need certain terms defined or anything like that.
So my thoughts are that if it's a wash, you purchase the property and are able to sell it, I believe, within 120 days, I think you mentioned to me earlier, without the trust losing any money in that time frame, and the opportunity is to give a Revere resident that leg up on having an affordable first-time home buyer experience, then I think it's a good thing to do. If the trust ends up losing money on the deal, even if it's, $10,000 or $15,000, then I think that's something we have to look at a little bit more carefully. Those are my own thoughts.
Thank you. And part of what I'm going to research soon is what we think some of those associated costs would be. And I would expect to report that back to everybody kind of ASAP. Any other thoughts, questions? I'd include the members of the public that are here as well. If they have any thoughts, comments, questions on similar programs like this, feel free. If you're not, no pressure, but I saw you nodding along, so I didn't know if you.
Are they all single-family homes?
We had a question if they were all single-family homes. No. My understanding is that some of them are, but some of them are in condos, some of them are duplexes, triplexes, et cetera. So there's a mix.
I think one critical question might be, are there residents there who might be displaced if you didn't take action? So what does that
Yeah.
look like? And maybe related to that too, what are your responsibilities in that time component in terms of, something going there?
Yeah, he's going to tell you to go up to the yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You gotta,
Yeah.
you have to use the mic.
Sorry, I was just noting that if residents live there and there might be some risk of displacement, that might be a mission fit for the trust, but also noting that if whether the property is vacant or occupied, could also have, responsibilities for maintenance and et cetera that you'd want to consider.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, which is actually something else that I want us to sink into as well. So the good thing for these particular deed restrictions is that it's an owner occupancy requirement. So these are all owned and occupied by the person who bought it at an affordable price, like they qualified for the program. And it would be that owner that would be looking to sell, at the current affordable price. Thank you for, yeah. But I am quite certain that there probably are other deed restricted properties that are being rented out that, we don't necessarily, that we as a trust might not know about, but there might be an opportunity for us to get involved there and do some of that work that you mentioned to prevent displacement. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Other questions, comments on this topic before we move forward? Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your patience. I know we've got a pretty packed agenda today, so I wanted to kind of work through some of these things. And we will sink our teeth further into the homeownership piece, especially on the subcommittee, and report back. So we're going to move forward now to our guests from the neighborhood developers. So you all had heard previously about a proposal they had for a project at 110 Ocean Ave and where we might fit in to provide some support for this project. They also sent around a presentation in advance, which you all should have had a chance to read and digest a bit. So I trust that you all did that, that if you have, but we're going to have our guests here walk through the presentation and then leave a chance for us to ask questions at the end. So come on down. And now you already know where the microphone is and that you have to turn it on. So, and let me just
I learned how to press the button.
Okay, and I'm gonna maximize the presentation here. All right. Okay, at your leisure.
Great.
Oh, hold on, did I already go to the, is this page one?
I don't
Okay,
think
great.
so. I think there might be one before that. That is perfect. Okay.
Perfect, all right.
Great. Well, good evening. I'm Steve LaFerrier. I'm the Director of Real Estate at TND. It's good to be back in front of you. Thanks for having me again. And we're here to talk about 110 Ocean. So I'll try to be brief because we talked about it a few months ago. But it's a site that's currently owned by North Suffolk Community Services. Obviously, they're a nonprofit. They're currently serving 8 residents there, 7 in a group living environment and 1 in an apartment. And the building's sort of reaching the end of its useful life, and as you know, there's a lot of development in that area. So they were thinking a few years ago about how they maximize their mission and their impact at that site, and they reached out to us, and we've imagined sort of a redevelopment, and that kind of is based on, you know, our shared histories and service. Yeah, you guys are familiar with North Suffolk Community Services. They provide treatment and recovery services to individuals and families in Revere, Chelsea, East Boston, and Winthrop. We've worked together for a long time. We have 11 homes that are set aside for residents who are eligible for services through DMH, through them, as well as other people who happen to live in our properties who have services there. And we collaborate in a bunch of other ways too. So you go to the next slide, please. We're also a nonprofit, as you know. We're in Chelsea, Everett, and Revere. We can do three things, mainly. Our Connect program helps people achieve sustainable living wages and financial health. Our community building program is really focused in the Shirley Ave neighborhood, supports residents in strengthening leadership skills and taking action to improve community. And obviously in the real estate realm, we build, create, preserve affordable homes. We have approximately 775 affordable homes across Chelsea, Everett, and Revere, with 66 homes under construction in Chelsea right now. Next slide, please. Again, I think you're all familiar with the site. It's at a really great location across the footbridge from the Garfield Middle School, near the ocean, near the Shirley Ave Cultural District, near the Revere Beach T Station, near MGH. Next slide, please. The site is in the floodplain, as is our 571 Revere site. So we're really focused in general on creating great homes, and that means focusing on sustainability and resiliency. So it is designed to be certified as Passive House. We should actually very soon be getting our kind of passive house pre-certification, which means that it'll be certified that if built as designed, it will achieve Passive House certification. It will be all electric, so heat, hot water, AC, all electric, no gas. 7 stories, under 70 feet. Part of that is using cross-laminated timber for the floor and ceiling assemblies, which helps save on some space. And we've elevated the building and everything other than sort of parking entrance space out of the flood zone. You can kind of see that in this first floor plan. The first floor is mostly parking and a lobby, and then you can move over to the second floor. The second floor we've started to call the North Suffolk floor. We'll be recreating that group living environment and actually adding a small amount of capacity, so there'll be 8. It'll serve 8 individuals. And there'll also be a 5,000 square foot office there for North Suffolk's ACCS team, Adult Clinical and Community Services team. They're the folks who provide services to people living in community-based settings. It'll really be a benefit. Right now, I think they're in kind of a variety of spaces and don't have as much of that collaboration space as they'd like. So this will be a great opportunity to consolidate those services and make them more efficient. We can head upstairs. And then you can see sort of the next 5 stories have more of your traditional sort of family affordable housing, 48 family units in addition to the 8 group living environment units, so 56 homes total. And they're really focused on deep affordability. I think that's that third goal that you mentioned, Joe. Half of the units are set aside for folks at 30% AMI with some type of operating support. So it's really that 0 to 30% AMI band. And then the other 28 units, the other half, are at 50% AMI, which I think is pretty unique. I think we've made the case to EOHLC that the generally affordable housing in this case is aimed at 60% AMI. And the way median incomes have increased substantially over the last 5 or 6 years. And we haven't seen that same substantial increase in median incomes in our community. So we've really made the argument to them that to be affordable to Revere residents, it needs to be at a deeper level than what they're funding in most other communities. So I think that's a pretty unique feature of this project. So covering a lease up, we have to comply with fair housing law. I mean, I think you guys referenced this earlier. We'll do marketing for 90 days as we normally do. You guys will certainly hear about it multiple places. We'll then have a lottery. The 8 group living environment folks will be obviously supported through DMH, and we'll also give a preference for folks who are displaced by the development, the 7 individuals who are there now, to be able to move back if they'd like to. And then we also have 12 additional 1-bedrooms that are set aside through the Facilities Consolidation Fund for folks who are eligible for services through DMH, the Department of Mental Health. There'll also be we have 4, it's a sort of unique COVID-era program called ARP, Home ARP units that'll be set aside for qualified populations. That again, these are the deep affordable units. And then we'll have the maximum local preference for the units that are not this direct referral for 70% Revere residents. And that'll cover the deeply affordable family housing units, all of the family housing units. So this is sources and uses. This is sources and uses as of when we submitted this 2 or 3 weeks ago. And you'll notice at the very bottom, there's about a $2.5 million gap. And coming to the Revere Housing Trust tonight is a part of trying to fill that gap. So if you go to the next slide, we're obviously asking the Revere Housing Trust for $250,000, which is about 10% of the gap. We have applied to the Department of DOER, the Department of Energy Resources, for a decarbonization grant that's available for projects that is for the first time available to new construction projects, but has funded rehab projects in the past that are affordable, that are energy efficient, and that are not having carbon in the building. So we applied for that. We should hear by the end of the month. We're supposed to hear earlier this month. We got a positive vote this morning from the North Suburban Home Consortium for $1.1 million of the Home ARP funds. And we've been talking to the state about additional state low-income housing tax credits. So this is really, the state is also aware that we're asking you guys for this. And so this really helps us leverage the NSC money that we got this morning, the money we've been talking to the state about, and that DOER money, close that gap and let us start construction late summer, early fall. And that's kind of a summary of the timeline so far. So we've been working at this for about 2 years now. And like I said, we're working toward an August or September construction start. Awesome.
Thank you very much for that. So I want to open it up to questions from board members.
I don't really have a question. I just thought it was quite thorough. Thank you for providing this early. I think it's an outstanding opportunity. 56 units, as you suggested, as you mentioned before, and the variety of different housing to different family sizes. And I do like the opportunities for like non-car, you can bike there, you can walk there. And from what I understand, it's pretty accessible to the T, so you could walk to the Blue Line if need be. So I don't really have any questions. I appreciate the opportunity that you provided us to present this. I think it's pretty outstanding.
Thank you.
And one thing I do want to clarify for everyone, so the ask is for $250,000, but this can be broken up over the course of 3 fiscal years. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's some flexibility here. I mean, we will need to sign loan documents for that amount, in order to start construction. We don't necessarily need that money on day one. So if, there's other competing priorities that need that money immediately, like I said, we have a 2-year construction period as long as it's getting in sort of in that window. I guess the only thing I would add to that is if it's more about having a cushion, the earlier this is in, that means the less of a construction loan we're borrowing. So we're not paying interest on that. So we can be very flexible, but those are, I guess, the parameters.
I think from a trust standpoint, my thought, and I'd want to open this up to, first of all, I want to echo Anayo's thoughts, thank you for the presentation. And also that, this serves a really particular need that I think is really important for the community. I love that 50% AMI, case is really important. I do think that that's a real gap in affordable housing, in the community, and appreciate that that's something that's on your mind, and this is something that's going to serve a lot of needs. So we appreciate that. I think, my thought upon looking at this, upon looking at how, again, this is an opportunity for us to have our funds be leveraged by larger funding sources, state funding sources, other outside entities, but still fit it within our budget. If we think about it as a 3-year investment, if we were to authorize investing $250,000 into this and spread that out to, about around 83,000, per fiscal year for 3 years. When you think about that budget framework that we looked at earlier in the day, and think about where, 80,000 or so to support people in that extremely low income range fits within our, we don't have unlimited money to tackle every priority, but we really were thinking about, okay, $150,000 each for a few different homeownership projects, maybe 75,000 for a senior home repairs project. And then where this would fit in within the budget, over a few years in terms of supporting, those that are in the extremely low income range. I think that it's something that we can do. I think it fits in really well with our priorities and with our budget. And I highly recommend it. So I want to make sure that people have a chance to ask their questions. But just so you know, my thought is this is exactly the type of thing that we should be supporting. And after looking over our budget, I think it's something that fits within. If we were to approve this request contingent on spreading it out over 3 fiscal years, I would highly recommend that to the board.
I do have one question. It's due at, they want to finish this in 2027. So
What's that?
I thought they want to have this completed by 2027, and we're 2025. If we were to piece it out by 3, would it disrupt their financing or?
Is the question, I think 2025, 2026, and 2027 would work. Is the question whether,
Essentially, I didn't want to disrupt any payment or financing flows if let's say this is an agreement, I'm fully in support of it, just to show my cards. Is a 3-year allocation disruptive to the necessities of your loan or any of that sort of thing?
no, like I said, the most critical point is we'll need to, sign loan documents and have that money, really committed in that way. As we're closing on the rest of our construction financing in August, September, if some of the funds aren't available, we'll be in construction for about 2 years. So if some of them aren't available until 2027, we can work with that.
Thank you.
I have a question. What is about the 20 households supported by DMH have referral process? What is mean?
Sorry, can you say the last part? I caught the 20 households.
Yes, supported by DMH have referral process.
Oh, have a referral process. So because those units are set aside for clients who are supported, who are eligible for services through DMH, they don't go through the lottery process that the rest of the 56 units go from. There's sort of a direct referral process from DMH. That's what that's referring to.
So when you say this passes directly, this is mean not necessarily they have to be Revere resident, right?
Yeah, so no one has to be a Revere resident. The other ones that go through the lottery, the other 36 units would have a set, we would apply to HLC, and we've always gotten the maximum of 70% local preference. I can't speak exactly to how the DMH process works, but I think that their referral process is, again, looking at needs, obviously, but also looking at sort of who's already in the area. So I think that there's certainly not the 70% local preference that goes through the lottery. It's just a different process. But I think they are mindful of wanting to keep people where they're getting their services and where their communities are.
But, okay, the thing is, about the house ownership here, we are working strictly for the people from Revere. So we want to keep it in the same way, the most people coming from our residents. That's the principal point for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We try to look at the budget and everything is for the prioritizes our residents.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we're going to do the maximum that we can to make sure that we're serving people who are already in Revere. If you're having a project that's state funded, whether it's rental or home ownership, you're never going to get a requirement that everyone is a Revere resident. So we'll work within that framework to have the absolute best that we can. And obviously, when the people move into this building, they become Revere residents too.
Yeah, so one thing I would add to that, and I appreciate you bringing it up, I think that it's a good way for us to think about the pros and cons of the different ways we try to leverage the funds that we have, right? For instance, with the 133 Salem Street, we put in a relatively small sum of money, but we were able to leverage a larger state pool of money by doing that. And so that allowed us to support more affordable units, where a portion of them have a residency preference, right? But not all, because under housing law, right, it can't be 100% residency preference. It's 70% is the maximum that's allowable. The flip side is if we fully control a process, right? Like if the unit is fully paid for by us, we fully control that process, which is great. And I want us to explore opportunities to do that. But that means we're paying the full cost of every unit, right? So 300, 400, 500,000, per unit of affordable housing. I think, this is just one person's opinion. We need to kind of use both avenues. I think that we certainly don't have the revenue, as a board to only go down the avenue of investing in units where, we are purchasing the entirety of the cost of it, and therefore we have complete creative control, for lack of a better term, on kind of how the funds and how the units are used. But we should do some of that because I think it's important. But I also think that it's important for us to take advantage of opportunities that we have, to leverage state funding, to leverage private funding, to leverage, nonprofit support, and to support folks in the extremely low income range, where the maximum amount possible would have that resident preference. So I really appreciate you bringing that up, though, and that's completely valid. I noticed that Dean had questions or comments as well.
One of them was already asked, did splitting up the down payment or the money of $83,000 a year for 3 years, would that work? And so that's been answered. What's the total number of units over there?
56.
So approximately 20-something units would go to Revere residents?
Yeah. So there's the 36 units that aren't the DMH units.
Right.
70% of that would have a preference for
So
Revere residents.
over 20 units. So by contributing $250,000, we'd be contributing to housing over 20 Revere residents in affordable housing, and 56 units total in affordable housing. And I thought as a trust, we were okay with, putting up, I think, $250,000 for one condominium that would help one family there. So the bang for your buck to be able to put up, $250,000 and then unlock all those affordable units. And granted, it's not 100% Revere resident, but over 20, Revere residents will have that preference to get in there. I think that's great. I also think that there's a number of Revere residents that do have AHVP, MRVP, DMH vouchers in the city that a lot of people aren't aware of, and I'm sure that those people would be anxious to get in line and be referred over to a nice brand new building on the beach as well. So I'm all for this project.
Yeah, if I may add sort of two things. So there are 8 residents who are in the process of temporarily or permanently relocating. That choice is up to them, but they have the right to return, and they're part of that 20. So those are Revere residents who are probably going to temporarily leave the community and may come back. So I'd add that there. And I'll just share a quick anecdote. So we finished a project in Chelsea that has both rental and home ownership. They have it has 6 home ownership units. So that has a 70% local preference, a 4 were preference for Chelsea residents. One of the folks who bought one of the other 2 units was actually formerly a resident of our 571 Revere affordable rental housing project here in Revere. So it's a great example that this is really kind of a regional problem, and we really believe in the local preference. We want to do as much as we can to have this building serve Revere residents, but there's a benefit to all of our communities when we're thinking sort of regionally, and we're creating a little bit that isn't fully committed to one community. So
and I would add another thing that really resonates to me about this is that, you know, in particular, if you think of the address of exactly where this is located and the dynamics of, you know, I think all of the new construction that is kind of in that area has zero affordability, you know, component, you know, the zero affordable units, and I think any of them, I might be wrong about that, but I think that's the case. We can't go back and change that, you know, past, but we can help contribute to the socioeconomic diversity of that neighborhood, which really it is a neighborhood right now, right? The kind of Ocean Ave, waterfront square, whatever you want to call it, kind of area, at a range of incomes. And so I think that that's something that's really valuable, and happy to be supportive of it. Other questions, comments, feedback? Yeah, so I always like to give people as much time as possible to deliberate and, you know, answer questions, although I think being mindful of construction timeline, I would like to propose a motion that we approve this $250,000 funding spread out over 3 fiscal years. And I would ask if I could get a second to put that
Second.
to a vote. Right. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
And I see Matt's in favor as well. Any opposed? Okay, seeing none. So I will work with you and with the treasurer on the, you know, exact nature of how that will go. But definitely really appreciate the presentation and grateful to everyone that we have the opportunity to support this project. So thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for your support and for all the work you guys are doing too.
I've got one more question. How can we follow the progress after this? Like, is there a website or just to see how you guys are doing? Because I'm actually quite interested in it. I think it's a really cool, and as Dean mentioned, the bang for your buck is outstanding for it. So how would we continue to follow along the progress?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have not done so yet, but before construction starts, we'll have a meeting with neighbors and we'll establish a list where we'll send out regular updates, usually about once a month or so. So I don't know if I have all of your email addresses, but I can certainly coordinate with Joe to make sure that you all have the opportunity to get on that list.
Thank you so much. That'd be great.
Absolutely.
Don't worry, I'm going to make you come back and do updates each year over the course of the 3 years. So
Yeah, that's fine. Happy to do that.
terrific. All right, thank you so much. Appreciate
you.
it. Okay, thank you. And so really grateful for everyone's patience. I know we've had a bit of we're coming up on an hour, but I do want to make sure that we have a chance to talk to Laura Christopher and Harry Smith. I know we've thrown around the term community land trust, community land trust, community land trust over the past few months. And every time I've said, I don't want to go too deep into the weeds of this because Laura is like really like gung-ho about this and has a lot of thoughts on it. And we're so excited and so proud and so happy that you just came back from maternity leave. So hooray, congratulations. And we're excited to have you back to work, but obviously super excited to hear that everything's going well at home. But we have Laura here in person and we have Harry Smith here virtually. And Laura, if you want to come up, I will share the presentation that you sent me and we're going to talk a little bit about Community Land Trust. So let me do that. And why don't you introduce yourself to those who don't know you while I pull this up.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for having me here at the Trust Fund Board. I know some of you from working around Shirley Ave and being able to talk about these issues before. And I thank you for your early leadership on helping us begin to frame the research questions we might have around community land trusts. And I'm looking forward to speaking more with you all about it. I just want to step back to introduce myself. Because sometimes even the folks I've met, you don't know what are we doing here. You just sort of meet me and we start talking about stuff. So I'm Laura Christopher. I'm with a state agency called Mass Development, and I'm working in Revere as part of a 3-year commitment to the Shirley Ave neighborhood through a program called the Transformative Development Initiative. The T word's kind of scary, but what it means is we want to help that neighborhood, any neighborhood we're working in, transform according to the trajectory and the projections that they hold tight. And in Revere, that goes part and parcel with thinking about livable communities and the way the trust fund is. And so as part of that work, we have convened a partnership. It includes the neighborhood developers, the city, Women Encouraging Empowerment, Mass General, and we're tackling different community priorities. Over the course of the years, we have different resources from Mass Development to bring to bear on neighborhood challenges. One that's named Harry Smith today is we have a program called TDI Technical Assistance, where we can bring in experts to help the neighborhood and the city, as often these are citywide challenges that are felt at a neighborhood level, study different solutions. So before really introducing Harry to talk about the ways in which Mass Development's TDI program might partner with the trust fund and the city and neighborhood partners to look at CLT as a possible vehicle, I just want to also frame up that we're here as a partner in the city for this and potential partnerships beyond. And I'll just share a little what came to mind even hearing about your annual priorities. So of course could we help investigate or kick the tires on a CLT type of model? We're definitely happy to do that. We also have been convening a new Shirley Ave Neighborhood Association that has in its sights a goal to convene sort of a lender roundtable and a way to work with local lenders on loan pools. Made me think of your ADU potential programming. And then we are working with Mass Housing Partnership together with City of Revere in a program to support business owners who own their site developing housing on site that can help to stabilize those businesses in the community and build wealth locally. So potentially some of those small to mid-scale development that we're talking about could be supported through that. But that's all context. So you know, don't think one trick pony. TDI is here to help with sort of any of the strategies that pop out to you guys. But we're really here to talk CLT tonight. And so I want to introduce Harry Smith as a consultant we're working with, topic area expert.
All right, Harry's here virtually, so I'll just feel free to take it away, and we'll just hear your voice booming through the speakers here.
Thanks, Harry.
But I don't look like the Wizard of Oz, right? I'm not on a giant screen or?
Nope, just the slideshow. Although I will maybe ask you to just let me know if you have it open when you want me to page ahead to the next page.
Sure, I'll do that. Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Joe, and thanks for having, I want to thank the Portable Housing Trust Fund for having us here. So, you know, just to follow up on what Laura said, I've, little bit about myself. I've been a long time Boston resident, lived in Jamaica Plain since the early 90s and have been a community organizer at different community development corporations and including Jamaica Plain, NDC, and also working in East Boston in public housing and all around, you know, community trying to take more control and having more voice around development and what they're doing. So I've worked with public housing residents, co-op residents, and also renters and limited equity homeowners. My most recent experience was as the director of the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative's Community Land Trust in Roxbury and Dorchester, which is a model that we'll talk a little bit about. We're not going to be able to go into great detail, but want to just you know, frame that a little bit. And for the last 6 years or so, I've been working with emerging land trusts across Boston area and in other communities, including helping the city of Somerville and Chelsea and Brockton form community land trusts over the past several years. And I was very excited to get a call from Laura and have this opportunity just to follow up on the Revere Housing Production Plan and the fact that there's one of the strategies talks about exploring the land trust model. So the first couple of slides are just straight out of the Housing Production Plan. Give a very good intro into what is a community land trust. Essentially, in the land trust model, the land trust is a community-based organization that's governed by a majority of local residents who hold the rights to the land and then work either with a private developer, nonprofit developer, or in some cases develop themselves, but they develop housing and other uses that is then in a home ownership situation sold to low or moderate income homeowner. And so if you go to the next slide, the couple of examples of that locally, one is, as what I mentioned, the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative, which has about 235 homes now on its land trust, in addition to community gardens, 2 acres of urban farms, community space, nonprofit space on about 30 acres in Roxbury and Dorchester. And then another example, Worcester Common Ground, CLT, is another community land trust that that operates. There are about 8 land trusts in the Boston area that are up and running and have some form of project. So it's definitely been growing over the past 5 to 10 years. And so I guess, looking at why I'm here and what I was called in for, with Mass Development and TDI, they have asked me to come in and help facilitate a process to explore whether a community land trust could be established in Revere, or whether the conditions are right, whether there are better vehicles to try to accomplish the same goals. And, so we're not here saying, oh, it's going to definitely be a community land trust, but we wanted to just have an open process with housing advocates and city officials and community nonprofit leaders, other residents in the, and others who want to participate. So we wanted to come obviously to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund because of the work you guys are doing, and really just want to start a process over the next couple of months of analyzing what are the opportunities, what are the challenges, what does it look like in Revere, so that's kind of what we're going to be looking to do. If you look at the next slide, there's just a bunch of questions that we would be asking of folks. What role could a CLT play? How would the community be involved? How does this further your housing production plan? How does the CLT relate to other organizations like TND or other nonprofit or for-profit developers or community groups? I know in Chelsea, the Chelsea Comunidades Interesadas CLT has had a close relationship with TND, who's given them a lot of advice and kind of free technical support, and also has given them good just cautions about where they should start. And they're starting, similar to the conversation you guys are having here, they've started with really focusing on low-income home ownership, which is something that the CDCs do, but land trusts often will play that role where there might be a gap where you can really provide permanent affordable home ownership to lower income residents, and really stay with those homes and really provide long-term stewardship and support to those families. So these are the kinds of questions we'd be looking at. Is it all of Revere? Would it be a part of Revere? Where do you want to prioritize? And frankly, are there other models or strategies that housing advocates could use? Again, we're not coming in pushing the land trust model. I've had a lot of experience with land trusts and other models. I will say that the model is extremely flexible and it's grown in popularity in part because of its flexibility in terms of goals, also in terms of being able to partner with CDCs and other nonprofits or other developers where the land trust would own the land, but bringing in a developer with more capacity who could actually get the project moving forward. So a lot of questions on the table. There are more questions to come. We don't have all of the answers tonight, obviously, but just wanted to give you a brief overview. And then finally, the last slide is just what we're hoping to do over the next couple of months into the summer is convene a planning committee of residents and advocates and other stakeholders, and also start doing one-on-one interviews with key stakeholders. I had a really good conversation with Joe a while back, and he had a list of here's some 5 or 6 other people you should definitely talk to, but we want to get that going now. So we're really open to suggestions of who we should pull into this process. At some point, we'd be looking at pulling together a retreat where we could hash through some of the recommendations and really look at the, strengths and weaknesses, opportunities, challenges around a CLT model. So that's what we're looking to do over the next several months. And like I said, the next steps is, next slide is just the next step. So it's fine. It's totally fine. It's just a repeat of what I said. I did have a slide, Laura. We have our email addresses and contact information. But Joe has those as well. So we just wanted to give you a little taste of what we're thinking about doing, and get any advice or preliminary questions you have. And like I said, if we can't answer them tonight, at least we can make sure that they're considered as part of the process.
Great. Now, I'll make sure that folks have a chance to view this slide, sort of some of the benefits of the community land trust model, which I know you talked about a little bit. So I'll send this presentation around to everybody. I know that we're past an hour, so I don't want to dive too deep in because I want to respect everybody's time. But I certainly want to carry this conversation forward as this process continues. Quick comments that I want to, Laura, did you want to just follow up? Or? Only if there was a question. Yeah, so I want to just kind of lay out a few things that come to mind for me and then give others a chance to do that as well. I think where I see the value in at least pursuing this and kind of looking into it is a few things. First of all, we've talked about the value of private capital, where the ability to set something up as a 501c3 and receive tax-deductible charitable contributions is something that we can't do. And having a partner, that does have access to that as a tool while we do our government side of things could be really powerful to, align efforts. And I also think that, where a land trust comes in is, Revere is a pretty good use case for whether it's this or some other strategy. We do have a lot of that quote unquote naturally occurring affordable housing. And a lot of it is frankly at risk. I think you think about the stock that exists that's kind of prone to, flipping would be one term for it, or gentrification or redevelopment or whatever term that you want to use. There's certainly parts of the city that are more untouched than others, I would say, in terms of kind of that type of thing happening with the naturally occurring affordable housing stock. So I think that there's not only one way to approach it, but I think this is one way that we should certainly explore as to how we can do that. And wanted to just begin the conversation, right, and just get people to know who some of the key players are and start talking. So,
Just a quick question. So, what does the CLT do? So let's say you're an entity, a corporation, you have a piece of land, you think it can be developed, you want to go affordable. What would the CLT do for that person?
There's different ways to do it. In the case of Dudley Street, they were able to acquire land from the city of Boston, and then they did a request for proposals. They did a community process where the residents said, what did they want to see? What type of housing? What type of use? And then they, for example, if the decision was to build affordable home ownership on those sites, then the land trust would find a development partner in most cases who can build the housing. Could be public, could be nonprofit, could be a private developer, with the agreement that once the house is built, the land goes on to the land trust. So to ensure that in addition to subsidies, the cost of the home is lower because it doesn't include the land value. And the land trust would then help with the marketing and the education of local residents and helping them, connecting with other groups to help them do first-time home buyer classes and other things like that. And then once a homeowner purchases this property, they have full ownership of the home. They're not a renter. They have full ownership of the home. There is a ground lease that governs kind of the resale formula. What happens when they sell back? If they want to sell, they would sell back. The land trust would have the right of first refusal, so that they could then get a return to the homeowner, but also then take the property back to sell it to another income qualified homeowner. One of the real features of the land trust is that they, unlike most home ownership, even affordable home ownership, where there's not a huge amount of follow-up, and in my experience with the homeowners, the land trust stays with that home. They provide stewardship. They one of the big features is that they will stay and try to help support the homeowner, helping them in the future get home equity loans or programs from the city, or if they're elderly, other services. The whole goal is to have a successful home ownership and to really prove the point that lower income residents have the ability to own a home. Many of them, when they move into the home, are paying less in mortgage than they were paying in rent, but they just couldn't get over that hump from the banks of getting an affordable home. So the land trust is there as an advocate and a support for them.
So what does the original owner of the land get out of the deal?
Well, in depending on the situation, in some cases, like I said, it's been done through publicly owned land where the land trust gets the land for a nominal amount, and so it's a foreclosed or tax lien or something like that. If it's a private sale, typically what we try to do is have enough parcels of property to be able to pay the existing property owner, and then be able to work with the partner to develop the land. It is a challenge now, and the home prices going up. CLTs have had to get very creative because there isn't the same amount of public land, but there are CLTs all over the place buying from the private market, getting acquisition funding, and trying to make it work. We've also worked with longtime residents of communities who may not have heirs. Maybe they're getting older and they're interested in selling or donating a home to the land trust. They want to see it go to a good use. So that's another way that land trusts have been able to access properties. It's a whole menu of possibilities. People have really had to get creative.
Yeah, and I kind of view.
Thank you.
Thank you. I kind of view it as being, obviously, a lot of these strategies are things that we can undertake as a trust, and I think the question is sort of scale. Where we have the ability to acquire. We have these small city-owned parcels that are going to be RFP'd out. We have maybe a duplex that becomes available or something. What we don't have necessarily the ability to do, whereas, we've seen something like this in East Boston, is some sort of acquisition process for 80 buildings and 300 some odd units. We're never going to have that type of scale, whereas depending on, the big question is who are the partners involved, where's the money going to come from, et cetera. But scale is really, to me, the difference, I think, between what we're able to do and maybe what might be able to come out of a trust type structure.
Yeah, I've got one quick question regarding the 501c3 status of the land trust. Have you guys established that, or is there a timetable for it? Because as Joe mentioned, one of the ways we can partner is through this process, and having that would really allow us to have access to certain private fundraising activities that we've pursued. So we wanted to know if you have that on the calendar.
Yeah, that's
It's a great question. Yeah.
No, you go ahead, Harry.
No, go ahead, Laura. I think we'll say the same thing.
Yeah, I had the same opening line. That's a great question. I think this process, we don't have a 501c3 or a timeline. I think the idea is that this process helps us identify, is that something that we want to undertake? The only sort of parts of the process that have happened so far, for myself, mostly is talking to other folks who run and have started CLTs, and not to put words in their mouth, but mostly they've said, setting up the 501c3 is the simplest part or the easiest part. It's the organizing around it. Who's the board? Is it the right fit? And all those questions sort of we've been laying in. So I think we don't have a timeline for it yet, but I feel like hopefully we're in the muck of the hard part now to figure out, is this a tool we want to invest in? And then I do have confidence we'll be able to establish a 501c3 as a structure if that's determined to be the case. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, first of all, good luck with that. As I mentioned, when you were starting this initially, when Laura was here, when you were on text, we tried to kind of establish some of those timetables, or at least get it out in the ether that it's good to get a legal framework, the ball rolling, because then we can do partnerships with the Affordable Housing Trust Committee. So the extent to which I guess I can help again, or we all can do that, it's kind of super important. I know if we continue the process of getting information and doing surveys, and that's helpful, but if we have a timeline, let's say in a year or 2 or 3, it would help us to kind of budget, because we actually are currently looking for, we explore different avenues for fundraising, some of which with private banks in the area, and there are timetables that we can work with if we have a general idea of how and when you guys would get established. If it's the easiest part, then that's great, then start it, and then we would be able to work hand in glove with you.
Yeah, and just one other, I think the timeline element I could share, and Harry, chime in here too, but most of his scope, which is an initial kind of exploratory scope, should wrap this summer. We hope to finish by the end of the summer. So more direction, could that be the immediate first step, legal establishment? Maybe, maybe not, but I think hopefully the scope will answer that question. We should end the summer at least with more of a timeline, I would think. Harry, I don't know if that's right, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I think having, and it's a great point. I think in the case of Chelsea, in the case of Brockton, for example, the first step was, is this something that fits into those communities? Is this something that people really want? And at the end of that process, they then created an operations plan. And one of the pieces of the operations plan, they worked with Suffolk University Legal Transaction Unit and got a great group of third-year law students to help them, and they were able to get 501c3 status. Same in Somerville. So there are resources around that. What they didn't want to set up an organization yet, in my understanding, and without feeling like there was a critical mass of Revere residents who really wanted this to happen, because this is really implying long-term stewardship, long-term control, and decision making. So we just want to make sure it's something that's there. But yeah, there definitely could then pretty quickly follow conversations around how to, moving forward with 501c3 status.
All right, want to give others a chance if you have questions, comments, feedback. Yeah, like I said, this is a starting point, so I anticipate having further conversations about this, but I just want to thank you, Harry, thank you, Laura, for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for all your contributions to this meeting. With that, okay, any other questions? Okay, so I'm gonna, in the interest of time, just table, we have a few other things that have some minor updates on the city side, but we'll let that wait until next meeting because they're not quite fully fleshed out yet. Any last questions, comments, public? No? Okay, with that, I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, any objection? Seeing none, we'll see you next month.